In this video, I'm going to try to do an intro to programming in Python tutorial that'll essentially try to take an absolute beginner and try to develop them into at least somewhat of a working proficiency. So this might actually be a little slow for those that have some programming experience. The reason I'm doing this is because coding and programming is a highly desirable skill, especially in today's job market, and I know a lot of people are trying to switch into this industry. So I'll try to do my best to at least teach you guys something, especially for those picking up this new skill. And I think the best language to first start in is definitely Python. There's a lot of other languages like C++, Java, Perl, and Python's been growing a lot in the recent years in all industries, especially technology, finance, healthcare. It's just, it reads almost like English. So, and if you're on this video, you probably know that Python's a really important language and is growing. So the first step is to actually install Python. So on Mac and Linux, it should become prepackaged with Python. If not, you can download it from the website. I'm going to be using Python 3. So you can just go to python.org and just Google search install Python, and you can just download Python 3 and make sure it downloads to your system, and it's included in your path such that when you're in the terminal, the terminal can find the Python command. And in Windows, you're going to want to download from this website. And you'll pretty much just download it like how you would download any other software. It will walk you through like a prompt, and you'll potentially get it on your system. So after that, you can open up your terminal and just type Python 3. See, so I have Python 3.7, a little bit older because I saw it was 3.8. So very first, there are, what you'll mostly use in Python is generally two different types. You can think of them as a number type and a string type. So there are different types of numbers as well, such as like integers and floats, but if you're an absolute beginner, then you can just think of it as numbers, and you can essentially use Python as like a calculator. So you can do like 5 plus 6, 11, okay? I mean, you can do a whole bunch of different things, right? So you see I added two integers together, you get 11, which is returned as an integer. But if you add an integer plus a float, it's going to cast the result to a float. That's why you see the 0.0 here. The reason is because you can lose precision if Python decided to cast it to an integer instead, such as 11.1. See how it casted it to 16.1, such that you don't lose that precision. Now in binary they're represented differently, but we can get into that different time. So the other data type is a string. So you can use the quotes for a string, like you're quoting someone, which makes sense. So you can type that. You can use double quotes or single quotes actually. So those are the two main types that you'll use on a regular basis a lot. The next important thing is definitely variables. So variables are essentially just an area of memory that you can store these different objects in. And these objects you can think of as these numbers or this string. And it's really easy to set a variable. You just type in a variable name like A without quotes, because with quotes it'd be a string. And then you could set it to hello, and then it's stored there. You can even print it out as hello. You can store another variable. You can store a number in that, and then you'll have a number. You can look at the type of these variables by just typing type. Type's a function, so it's a special keyword that's inbuilt into Python. So if you type of B, you'll see it's an integer, and the other one's a string. And then another really important function is definitely printing, which is really useful for debugging and showing output to the user. So with print, you just type print, and then you pass in a variable, so or a string or some type of object. So you can say print hello, and it'll print that out. Since this is a terminal, or an interactive terminal, you don't really need to type print to get that output, as you saw before. But printing will get rid of those quotes. So, and then you can also print your variables and print your number. So you can pass into the function like that. So yeah, that'll be a really good starting point for you to kind of be able to do this just interactively on the terminal. Is to just kind of do math, like x equals 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, right? And then just print x. And then another useful thing is definitely getting user input. So you see that print gets you output. So in order to get input, you use the keyword function input. So like this. And now it's prompting me to type something. So if I type in hello, X will now store hello. And then you can even prompt with a message. So if I put in a message in here, which is a string, what's your name? Right? Oh, my bad. I used the quote inside of the string. So let me actually change that, because it's going to try to chop it off. So what's your name? I'll type in Alex. Okay, now X stores Alex, right? Just with these really simple functions like input, print, variable storage, numbers, and strings, you can build out a pretty simple program that will kind of walk a user through some type of game. You can definitely easily build a command line game with just these 4 concepts. You can think of any game that you want. So in the beginning of the game, you can print out some message detailing the instructions and kind of asking for user input. And then once you get the user input, you store it into a variable. And then essentially you can do whatever you want with that variable. And then based on that variable, you can kind of change the state of the game and output again, kind of in this read, evaluate, print loop format that the program will just run forever until the user kills it. You can also see that you can easily build a calculator just with these 4 concepts. So again, you can write a program that prints out like what numbers do you want to add, and then you store those numbers in variables, such as this. You can do this essentially in a Python file, but we can talk about how to essentially script Python in a file later. But right now I'm just kind of interactively talking about the basic concepts that every Python programmer will need. So you can just say something like, what 2 numbers do you want to add, right? That'll print out that, and then you could say x is equal to input first number, so which is like, let's say 2, and then y is equal to input second number, and you can put 3, right? So now here's the thing. X and y are stored as strings. So if you look at this, type x and type y. It's stored as strings because Python wants to accept any type of user input, and it doesn't just want to interpret it as an integer, because it'll have to do some extra processing. So all you have to do is essentially cast it to a number. Like You can use a float, which will allow you to have decimal precision, or you can just use int, right? So now it's an int. So all you have to do now is type int x plus int y. You can say z equals to int x plus, and now you can say print z, which is 5. Okay, so that's really simple. Just you can make a program that is just a simple add calculator or multiplication, right? You can do multiplication, division, all this type of stuff, all the arithmetic operators. In order to get this program to kind of repeat, you kind of have to understand looping constructs. So in Python, there's two different types of loops. There's a for loop and a while loop. A for loop, you kind of iterate a known number of steps. So in a for loop, you get to repeat instructions a set number of times, and you can determine how many times you want to do it. So let's say I want to loop 5 times, right? So you say for I in range 5. And then you can just essentially say print I, right? You just want to print the numbers 1 to 5. Or actually 0 to 4. I'll discuss why. So range 5 is actually another Python keyword. It's a generator, which is another concept itself that you guys could look up or we can talk about later. But at this point, you can just mostly use it without understanding how it's implemented. So range, what it does is it generates numbers between 0 and n, where n right here is 5. I mean, you can also pass in 2 numbers such that it generates, let's say you pass in 2 numbers a and b. It will generate numbers between a and b minus 1. So it would look like this. Let's say 2 to 5, right? This will generate 2, 3, 4 because the second number is actually the stopping point. And further, you can actually not just increment by 1, but increment in steps of some other number, like 3. So in order to do that, you say for I in range, let's go from 2 to 10 in steps of 3, right? So what will this print out? It'll print out 2, 5, 8. Because it won't print out 11 because it's past 10. And we already saw before that it prints out the number just less than your ending range. Right? So 2, 5, 8. So that'll be that type of loop. With for loops, you can kind of guarantee what numbers you want to iterate over. The second type of loop is while loops. While loops are a little less controlled. So in order to specify a while, you just type in while, and then you have a condition. This condition, when it evaluates to true, it'll enter the body of the loop and execute those instructions, and then go back to the top. And if the condition is still true, it'll keep doing that loop until that condition is false, in which case it'll break out of the loop. So we can essentially do the same thing by setting a variable x equals to 1. And while x is less than 10, right? Now we're in the body. You can see we're in the body of this loop with the ... on the left. We can print out x, and then we can increment x such that it's increasing towards 10 and it doesn't get stuck in what's called an infinite loop, in which case in this program on the computer will keep running forever and just eat up resources. So that's typically a bad thing unless you want your program to run forever. Right? So 1 to 9, because at 10 is not less than 10, 10 is equal to 10, so that evaluates the false and it'll break out of the loop and come back. So yeah, that's pretty basic stuff. that you'll definitely need for programming anytime you're programming. And then the last concept I'll talk about is conditionals, or if statements, if conditionals, if else, if else. That's another really fundamental concept that programmers use daily, or every time they're programming and building logic, essentially. We can see what our x is right now. X is 9, or x is 10, because it broke out of this loop when it evaluated to 10. With if, to use it, you just type in if, like everything else that we've talked about. The keywords are generally what you're trying to express. So you can say if x equals 10, you can print something. X is 10. And then you can type else, which evaluates when the if condition is false. Print x is not 10, right? So what do you guys think this is going to print? It's going to print x is 10 because we already saw that previously, right? So x is 10. So that's a really important concept. And you can essentially combine them. You can combine this concept of branching, which is the if conditionals, with looping. But before I get into that, you can also type in, you can also use elif for checking further conditionals as it jumps down. So when you say if x equals to 1, which is not, right? Oops. Or you can type elif x is equal to 2, right? Print x is 2. Elif x equals to 3, right? Now you can keep doing this forever and ever. Print something, or do some instructions under the colons. And then else, print we are in else, okay? So obviously x is 10. It's going to check if x is 1. It's not. It's going to skip that, go to elif. Is x 2? No. Skip that. Skip those instructions. Is x 3? No. Okay. Then else, we're going to execute the statements under else, right? And just know that we don't have to just evaluate one instruction under that body of code. We can evaluate any number of instructions. And we can mix the printing like this. So it's going to print we are in else, x is 10, because it's not any of those previous numbers. Okay, so just for fun, let's see what happens when we add a string and an integer. So these types didn't match up. I know in other languages like JavaScript, it'll actually do some type of casting to one of the arguments and evaluate this. But in Python, you can't mix types like this because the expression kind of doesn't make sense. Like you're adding a string with an integer. Python's just going to break out and tell you there's an error. In this case, it's a type error. Okay. So yeah, lastly, I'll show you mixing like looping and conditionals. So looping I from this variable is I from 0 to 4. We can check if I mod 2 equal to 0. Now what is mod, right? Mod is essentially a remainder arithmetic operator. So you can look up modulus in Google and it'll pretty much just tell you that after performing division with the second number, what's the remainder, right? So, and this is the remainder if you guys remember doing long division in elementary school. So when you divide, let's say example like 5 mod 2. So 5 divided by 2 is 2.5, right? So there's two whole numbers in that can be divided into 5. So you have 2, and then the remainder is 1, which is 5 minus 4, because you can divide 5 by 2 whole times, right, to get 4. And then what's left? Well, it's 5 minus 4, which is 1. So with odd numbers, when you mod it by 2, the remainder will be 1. And with even numbers, like 6 mod 2, the remainder will be 0. So here we can check the number. We can say I is even, right? We can do this. Elif mod 2 is equal to 1, print I is odd. Else, we will never reach here. Because the remainder will either be 0 or 1, because it's modded. See? 0 is even, 1 is odd, 2 is even, 3 is odd, 4 is even. Which is right. And you can also mod by other numbers, and then the result will be between 0 and that number minus 1. So this will conclude this section of the video. I can go over. I'll go into more, progress further into the Python language and how to essentially program and develop software in Python. And yeah, so that'll be this. Hope you guys enjoyed, or I hope you guys learned something, especially the beginners, taking you guys from not knowing anything about programming and essentially being able to type some things in the terminal, typing Python into the terminal and getting it to work such that you can further express computation and ideas that are in your head onto the computer, and then the computer can evaluate for you. So we went over 2 basic types like numbers and strings, went over to variable assignments, looping, and then branching, and then we kind of combined everything, right? Because all this stuff is essentially used together. All right, thanks.